Great smoked sausage brings me back to when I was cooking in Texas. My go-to snack when I was working was usually a sausage foldover. Sometimes the guys making the sausage would form massive patties and would ask us to smoke them for dinner. I typically prefer not to have cheese in my sausage, but a jalapeno and cheddar link has such a nostalgic flavor for me. I'm going to show you guys how to make by far the easiest sausage recipe ever so that you can reminisce with me those fond memories working in the pit room. With that being said, let's get cooking. This sausage will be a mix of pork shoulder and lean brisket. I'm going to start with the bone-in shoulder. Now, whenever I do this, everyone always likes to remind me that Costco sells them boneless. While I'm not opposed to using boneless shoulders, the packs are usually too big, and I also like being able to practice my knife skills whenever I can. To make it easier on myself, the way I like to look at it, the shoulder is separated into 3 chunks that are split by the blade bone that's sort of a T shape. I like to remove the biggest piece along the flat side of the bone first. That way, I can maintain a flat surface to place on the cutting board as you start to trim out the 2 smaller, more challenging portions around the blade bone. Once it's been deboned, cut the pieces into evenly sized chunks. If you're using a less powerful grinder or using the grinding attachment on the KitchenAid, cut them smaller so you don't clog the grinder. This recipe will be for a 5-pound batch, which consists of 1,643 grams of pork and 625 grams of beef. You can use whatever split you'd like, but I'm still shooting for around a 70-30 meat to fat ratio. If you're new to this channel and haven't seen my all brisket sausage video yet, definitely go check that out. There's a lot more information on the basics of making sausage. I'll leave a link in the top corner for you to check out. Everything will be weighed out in grams, so one additional tool that I would highly recommend is a small scale to weigh out your spices. If you're looking to purchase one of these and all other tools that I use, click the link in the description below. It'll take you to my Amazon storefront with links to everything. Remember at the top of the video when I said,
I'm going to show you guys how to make by far the easiest sausage recipe ever.
I meant it, because the base of our spice mix will be Lawry's. And if you guys have been barbecuing for a while, you probably already have some sitting in your spice drawer. If you think about it, spice mix for sausage is pretty much a savory rub with curing salt added to it. Even though it does have sugar in it, I don't think you can really tell. For this spice blend, you'll need 25 grams of Lawry's as our salt component, which is a little bit low, but remember that we're going to be adding cheese and jalapenos to this later. And to that, we're going to add 20 grams of 16 mashed black pepper, 5.6 grams of curing salt, and 68 grams of milk powder. Give it a good shake until everything is mixed evenly. This idea came from my time working at Terry Black's Barbecue. I've learned so much during my time there, and you guys hear me talk about all the time about putting out good product while being efficient. And this is just one of the small examples I learned from there and continue to learn from my former bosses. So I want to give a huge shout out to Mike and Mark Black for their continued support, and thank you to them for giving me my first start in the barbecue world. Dump the spice mixture into the cubed up pork and beef, and then add 190 grams of water or any other liquid you'd like. Mix until all ingredients are mixed thoroughly and most of the liquid has been absorbed. 190 grams of water is about 8% of the weight of the meat. The more liquid you add, the juicier the sausage will be, but just know that about 10% is probably the maximum amount that can be absorbed. I went with 8% because I believe it creates a tighter bind, but still remains juicy. Now that it's been thoroughly mixed, this will rest in the fridge for at least a few hours, if not overnight, to absorb more of the liquid and season the meat all the way through. After resting overnight, this is what it looks like. You can see how much the salt from the Lawry's has changed the color of the meat. It has a much darker color, and the milk powder and spice mixture has become more tacky as the milk powder has absorbed the extra water. This will help keep the sausage juicy, and the extra protein in the milk powder will give the sausage a much tighter bind. Now that our meat has been seasoned properly, let's grind it up. Today, I'm going to be using my 1/2 horsepower meat grinder. Before we assemble the grinder, I like to keep all these pieces on a metal tray and stick it into the freezer for at least 30 minutes. This will prevent the parts from warming up too quickly. It's not really an issue with a 5-pound batch, but as you start making larger batches, I would highly recommend this step. Also, make sure that your meat stays cold up until the point you're ready to grind. The grinding plate I'm going to be using today is this 10mm plate. I also have this 4.5mm plate, but I think it's going to make the grind a little too smooth for my liking. As you start to grind the meat, just be mindful not to overstuff it. It should grind smoothly, or else you can run into problems like this. You can see that instead of cutting the meat, it's smearing. This could happen for a few reasons. The grinder or the meat was too warm, the grinder could have been overstuffed, or in my situation, I didn't pay enough attention when I was trimming and left some silver skin or membrane that end up being caught and create a mess in the grinding plate. If you see this happening, stop immediately, unplug the grinder before sticking your fingers in there, clean it out, and start over again. After cleaning up the grinder, I'm going to put this through the same 10mm grinding plate one more time to get a more uniform bind. You can tell that we cleaned it all out by the way it looks like thick strands of noodles coming out instead. This is caused by the extraction of myosin, which allows the sausage to bind together, and it's produced by mixing the farce until it gets that nice sticky texture. And that's why sausage producers use things like large tumblers, or at home you can use a stand mixer to mimic that same action. But I find that if you're doing a small batch, a double grind and mixing it with your hands is enough to extract the myosin. Now our sausage is almost ready to stuff. For our cheese, I'm going to be using this high temp cheddar cheese. I would say that most people either love it or they hate it. The first time I ever had the sausage, they were using high temp cheese. So today, that's what we're gonna be doing also. This cheese is made so that during the cooking process, the cheese doesn't melt and leave pockets throughout the sausage. For the pepper, I'm gonna be using 113 grams of strained pickled jalapenos. Give it a rough chop. We still wanna see a bit of the jalapeno specks throughout the sausage. The cheese and the jalapenos are added in separately because if we added in with the other spices, you wouldn't be able to see the cheese and the jalapenos in the sausage because they would be ground up into much smaller pieces. Before moving forward, dump the farce into a much larger bin so you have more room to mix. And I'm going to do a final check to see if the sausage is ready by sticking some on the palm of my hand and see if it sticks really well. When I tried it, I wasn't super confident in the bind, so I'm going to mix this by hand for a few more minutes until I get the bind that I'm looking for. This also gives me time to answer a question asked in the last sausage video. Someone asked, can you explain why you add water before grinding? It seems to me that ground meat would more readily absorb the liquid because of more surface area. And that's a great question. My reason for adding all the seasoning and liquid when the meat is cubed up is because I believe it creates a spice paste that's more evenly distributed during the grinding process. And the ground meat won't be as waterlogged because it will have absorbed most of the liquid overnight. In all honesty, both methods work. I've done both of them. I just use this method because it's easier for me. After mixing for a few more minutes and doing the palm test, you can see that the farce is ready. Throw in 220 grams of the cheddar cheese and the jalapenos that we chopped earlier. Continue to mix by hand until everything is mixed evenly. Fill up the sausage stuffer and pack it really tight to avoid any air pockets. Any air pockets that are in the stuffer will end up as air pockets inside the sausage. Place a tray underneath and make sure the tray is slick with water so as the sausage gets stuffed, it's able to slide on the tray. Push out the farce until you can see it at the end of the horn. The casings that we're using today are 28 to 32mm hog casings. These have been washed of the excess salt and have been soaked in warm water for about 30 minutes. Before putting the casing on the horn and the stuffer, I like to find an end of the casing, open it up with 2 fingers, and get a couple scoops of water into the casing. This will help clean out any excess salt and also lubricate it so it doesn't stick to the horn of the stuffer, which will also cause it to tear. Slip the casing on all the way down to the base, tie the end with a knot, and then begin stuffing. While stuffing, I like to keep my thumb on top and my 4 other fingers underneath to catch and guide it. I'm controlling how much comes out by gripping a little bit more if I want it to slow down, or less if I want to come out quicker. And as you go, twist the link into a coil so that it can move more freely and doesn't tear. A lot of people ask me how much they should stuff the casing. And I would say it really depends when you decide to twist each link. If you want to fill the entire casing and then twist the links like I'm showing here, I would pack it a little loose so you have room to pinch and twist the links. If you pack it too tight and try to twist, it'll most likely tear. If you decide to twist the links as they come out of the stuffer, then I would recommend stuffing a lot tighter. Also to remember when you're twisting the links that you go opposite direction every other link. The first link if you twist over, next link you will twist under, and then over, and then under. Now that these links are all made, I'm going to throw these links into the fridge on a wired rack overnight to let the casings dry out. It's the next morning and our sausages have been drying out overnight, so let's start the fire. And you guys know the drill. We're going to add Korean newspaper for some extra flavor, Chud's snake nests to start the fire, and Fogo charcoal. Since we're just cold smoking this links, you don't need a lot of coals. This is a variable that you're gonna have to play around with depending on the size of your smoker, but also what the temperature is outside. I'm firing up my 250 gallon primitive pit named Heisenberg, and it's about 10 degrees outside. So my fire is most likely gonna look much larger than yours. We're shooting for a really smoky fire and cooking at a temperature around 150 to 170 degrees. When placing your links, you wanna make sure that there's enough space in between so you get smoke on all sides. I have a special technique called the claw. When placing links, I like to use this grip to create even spacing. When placing the next link, if my fingers are touching the link on top, I know I have enough space in between the two links. This just allows you to move quickly if you're having to load an entire smoker full of sausage. Another thing I like to think about is trying to get the biggest links towards the back wall and the smallest ones towards the door in hopes that they all finish roughly around the same time. Let it smoke for 3 to 5 hours and has reached an internal temperature of 160 degrees. After reaching an internal of 160 degrees and chilling in the fridge overnight, this is what it looks like. You can kind of see the little specks of yellow from the cheddar cheese and the green from the jalapenos through the casing. The casing right now doesn't look great. I'm going to reheat the sausage in a 300-degree oven for 15 to 20 minutes or until the internal temperature has reached 150 degrees. With the reheat, the casing has become really nice and smooth, and now you can really see the green, the yellow, and the black peppers really starting to pop. And since we packed the sausage stuffer tight, there aren't any air pockets. Now let's test the texture of our sausage with a snap test. That's what you want to hear. The sausage just pops with the casing being super taut, and with a bite, it crunches like a crisp cucumber. That bite of the creamy, salty cheese and the tang and slight spice from that pickled jalapeno is such a nice flavored combo. It's almost like the perfect bite of a movie theater nacho, but instead of a chip, it's sausage. And as good as the sausage is on its own, let's finish this the way that it should be eaten, as a foldover. Brisket and ribs are great, but a well-executed sausage has texture. It's salty, it's savory. Then you get a little brightness and acidity from a dill pickle, some crunch and freshness from raw onion, and maybe a little drizzle of barbecue sauce if you want a bit of sweetness. And it's all wrapped up in a slice of white bread that's just there so that you can get all those flavors and textures in every bite. I always tell people that one of my favorite flavors that most people don't talk about is nostalgia. It's like umami. Can't really describe it, but once you taste it, your mind gets flooded with memories. Whenever I eat this, I think about those long hours in the pit rooms, and it fills me with great pride and joy that I was able to do it with some great people around me. This is a really basic sausage recipe that you should feel free to play around with. Try using a block of cheddar instead of high temp cheese. Maybe use fresh jalapenos instead of pickled for a different pepper flavor. Instead of Lawry's, try another one of your favorite savory rubs to see if you find a rub that really works well. If this is your first time making sausage, best of luck trying to do so. It just takes a little bit of practice, but I promise you, you'll get there. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, please make sure to like, subscribe, share this video with your friends, and I'll see you guys in the next one.